I'm stuck. Oh, there we go. So here is what we are aiming to cover today in the 11 till 1 session. As you can imagine, it's difficult to cover absolutely everything to do with being an assessor in one day. So we try and kind of vary the topics each year and evolve it. We do have recordings for the last 3 years which cover other aspects such as EDIA, interview tips, and so on. So do go back to those. It's not kind of like they've become obsolete by any means. So we'd like to cover some of the broader aspects of the Chartership application and review process and some recent updates and trends. We've got the whole Chartership team here. So we've got Jenny, Mohammed, Kate and myself. So Mohammed will cover data protection, very important consideration given the amount of often commercially sensitive material from candidates that we are handling with their trust. For our technical topics, we'd like to tell you about recently approved changes to the criteria for being a supporter. And we then welcome a small panel of willingly arm-twisted volunteers from the audience to kickstart a group discussion about what you are looking for from the candidate, about competency and criteria for in relation to sustainability and the environment. As these are often given less attention, and there are varying levels of confidence that I observe between assessors in the reviews. So thank you to Louise, put your hand up, Louise, who helped us instigate incorporating the very important topic of sustainability into the Chartership criteria in 2023. So she joins us here as a CJOL and Seaside Fellow, specialising in contaminated land. We've also got James Dodds, a hydrogeologist with a lot of quarrying experience, and also Marcus Chan, an engineering geologist with experience working in both the UK and Hong Kong. Lastly, I've included supporting documents and 20 plus candidates. We made a change that took effect at the start of this year for 20 plus candidates to provide a minimum of 1 supporting document. And it's been interesting to see how this is tackled and what we can learn about how it applies to any candidate actually applying for Chartership in terms of the types of documents that are appropriate. But first, before we dive into these topics in detail, I'd like to invite our Head of Membership and Development, Jenny Boland, to give us a short welcome address. So thanks, Jenny.
Good morning, everyone. It is an absolute privilege to be here today to welcome you to the Chartership Training Assessor Training. So as Eleanor mentioned, I'm the Director of Membership and Development at JOLSOC. So I've been here for about 7 years. So the first 6 years largely focused on fundraising, which is my background. But in the last year, I've had the absolute honour to work with Mohammed, Kate, Eleanor and the team to support our membership in Chartership. But enough about me. So I mean it when I say that I feel extremely privileged to be here to speak with you all today. So when Eleanor kindly invited me to come and do a welcome, I was trying to rack my brains as to how it's possible to kind of adequately welcome and thank a group of our most dedicated volunteers, the Society's most critical and engaged supporters. So this is me racking my brains. So we know that you give up a huge amount of your valuable time to ensure that the highest professional standards are upheld within the profession. And the work that you do is at the heart of our charitable objectives, and we're incredibly grateful to you all. So in thinking about how we could possibly thank you, we've taken a bit of inspiration from the fact that last week was National Volunteer Week. So a week to celebrate the huge amount of voluntary support that charities and other not-for-profit organisations receive to ensure that they're able to run. And I suppose we have tried to kind of take inspiration from this to quantify the gratitude that we have to you and the impact of your support. So I'm not sure that we've done this extremely well, so please bear with me, but we have done a few calculations working with Eleanor and Kate and considering the Chartership assessment process. So the huge amount of work that you put into interviews, preparatory work, deferrals, training, and we've estimated that over the period of 1 year, the Society benefits from around about 4,000 hours of voluntary support from our Chartership assessors, which is an absolutely enormous figure. So we've considered what this might mean in terms of in-kind support, and we've done some calculations using the Heritage Lottery Fund's gift-in-kind assessment of the value of professional services. And we estimate that the in-kind support that the Society receives from all of you every year is over £186,000, which is phenomenal, like a huge amount of money, and we wouldn't be able to run Chartership without your support. So to put this into context, 186 grand could, for example, buy you a new customised electric Land Rover Defender. It could be parked outside Burlington House, or ideal for rugged field work. It could also purchase a meteorite. So in 2021, a Turkish chickpea farmer found a 68 kilogram meteorite in his chickpea fields, estimated to be over 4,000 years old, and which he sold for 180 grand. It could, for example, purchase an island. So there's a 10-acre island, and please forgive my pronunciation, Elan Loch Osa in Scotland, which is uninhabited, which you can purchase for under 180 grand. So perhaps Chartership Isle or Assessor Island. And so we've considered this, and then we went a bit further, and here you really are going to have to bear with us in terms of our calculations. But we've extrapolated that over the last 35 or so years that you've been supporting us, and Chartership assessors have been supporting the society to deliver Chartership, we have benefited from over 140,000 hours of voluntary support as a society, and that is flabbergasting. So using the same HLS calculations in terms of monetary value to the society in terms of a gift in kind, this would be over £6.5 million. So in terms of providing context for this, and perhaps giving some examples that are slightly more relevant than the last ones, that could, for example, be more than enough to purchase a 999-year lease for a Grade 2 star listed building in Piccadilly. Or it's enough, for example, to run our organisation for well over a year. And the figures up there are the impact figures from last year. So you'll see that we welcomed over 1,400 school children into Burlington House to inspire them into geoscience careers. We held over 300 events. Our community, published over 600 articles. We also had over 95,000 people access our educational resources online. So it just puts into context how enormous your support is to the society. And we know that our Chartership assessors are our most engaged and valued supporters. There's not one of you in this room that I think is just volunteering as a Chartership assessor. You're supporting us through educational activities, sitting on our various committees, council membership, through spreading the word about membership, convening conferences, publishing articles. So we know that we are incredibly privileged to I'm incredibly privileged to be in front of you all today, and the society really, really does value your support. So I suppose it goes back to my original question of how it's possibly adequate to be able to welcome you in today and to thank you for everything that you do. And it's really hard because we are so indebted to you all, but nevertheless, I would say a huge thank you for everything that you do. We are super grateful for all of your help, and it has been an absolute honour to welcome you today, and I hope you have a brilliant rest of your day with your training. Thank you. I'll pass back to Elian.
Thanks, Jenny. So, why are we here? For the glory of, well, the society, not the empire. Thanks Marcus Aurelius or Richard Harris in the original Gladiator. Sorry, that was a very tenuous film link, but it does just set the scene. So I know we aren't looking for glory. I mean, certainly Jenny has set out all the enormous amount of work that you do. But what I'm trying to say is don't underestimate the value of your role as an assessor towards the promotion of professionalism in geoscience. I think Jenny has set out the enormity of the inputs that you provide, but it's always useful to remind ourselves of the context of Chartership as the professional milestone that it represents. So an academic qualification emphasises theoretical knowledge and research, whilst the way I see it is that professional qualifications focus on the practical application of the skills relevant to a specific field and the additional aspects around professionalism. So Chartership provides a way to validate the competency of someone as a practicing geoscientist and as their expertise has evolved over time. I would argue this is the case in both an academic and commercial setting. And I genuinely believe that our credibility as geoscientists would be strengthened if Chartership represented the default standard that was recognised by all, so to clients, regulators, employers, and the general public. So what does the Chartership standard mean or demand? We no longer have a minimum number of years of career experience, although we still advise that we are looking at 4 to 6 years of postmasters level. It means that Chartered Fellows are committed to ongoing personal development, so CPD. And this is something that we really encourage from an early career stage to people joining us as fellows, or people who are joining us as students and then going on to convert their student membership to fellowship, and trying to get that chartership sort of pathway on their horizon right from the start of their membership journey with us. So for those, we're having chartership as a prerequisite to progressing to a further specialist category, in some cases such as minerals reporting codes, where there is no assessment per se for someone to act as a competent person. This can cause some concerns about chartered geologists acting as CPs when they do not have the self-declared 5 years of experience in a particular mineralisation. But it's not the case that those people, shouldn't be getting chartered until they are at CP level. They are carrying out their assessments for minerals. In carrying out your assessments for minerals candidates, you can caveat and make recommendations about the pending experience still required in the feedback that you give. So that's something worth bearing in mind for all areas of expertise. We are asking them to be competent, not world-leading experts. So what are the myths? That the person has reached the end of their professional development. No, I don't think any of us ever have, even if we are a world-leading expert. That the person will always be a chartered professional. I think that comes as a bit of a surprise to candidates when I'm doing sessions with them, that they're post-nominals from their degrees. They can always hold those, but they do have to maintain their CPD and remain a member of the society in order to retain their chartered status. And that the person is fully competent in signing off in legally binding documents. As I said, we're all on a progression, and it's about being competent and not a world-leading expert, and knowing your limits of professionalism and adhering to the code of conduct as such. So in more tangible terms, what is the purpose of being an assessor? As you know, being chartered means maintaining your CPD, being bound by the code of conduct, and remaining a paid-up fellow of the society, of course. The Society wants to support Chartered Fellows to maintain professional standards by providing ongoing CPD through our growing collection of training courses, as well as the chance to develop your skills by becoming a mentor or supporter for other fellows working towards chartership. This can lead on to progressing to becoming an assessor, both for mid and senior career, as well as for those in the retired category. Hopefully, this trajectory for fellows is more evident on our new webpage, in terms of aligning your career progression alongside your membership benefits and journey, and something I'd really encourage you to share with your junior colleagues as part of their career progression. So not only do we believe it's rewarding to give back to the earth sciences community, we believe that being an assessor benefits your own professional development in other ways, and these are the things in bullet points that we hope you will get out of being an assessor. So a primary reason for having our event today is to reinforce and facilitate the need for consistency and maintaining a uniform standard in the assessment of chartership applications. This is really essential in setting a clear standard for what chartership represents and maintaining the rigour of the process. Last year, we introduced a reward scheme for assessors, which allows you to enjoy 50% off the fellows rate of one of our training courses per year by being an active assessor during the year. And that being an active assessor extends to doing CPD audits, helping out with accredited training scheme reviews, and so on. We've had a surprisingly small uptake on this, so we're genuinely keen to support your own CPD. So in case you just simply weren't aware, here are the courses we've got for the rest of 2025, which you can access via the QR code. And I think in your pack, we had a little business card size with, there's a QR code on one side to the courses that we have, and a QR on the other side about what we would like to hear from you about what courses you'd like us to be offering, either for yourself or for your more junior colleagues who are working towards chartership. So do let us know. So recent trends in chartership, I think, often I appreciate that you're doing your individual reviews and you don't necessarily have the context of, the other reviews going on around you. So we have been seeing a 30% increase in applications from 22 to 23. So the levels of applications are now higher than what we had before the pandemic. And those levels have now been maintained in 2024. And we, in fact, had to set a cap on application numbers of 50 per round, which is about right for us, I think. We're not having to turn a lot of people away, but we definitely needed to put that cap in place. So that growth and sort of future outlook is another reason we're keen to encourage progression of chartered fellows towards becoming an assessor to support this growth and to make sure that, we're sustainable going forwards. The biggest constraint is in assessor numbers. It can be a real bottleneck to continue success. We've had a number of assessors who've gone absolutely above and beyond for us in recent years with, a number of assessors doing sort of 5 to 8 reviews, which is just a phenomenal amount of work. And I don't want them to burn out. So to have a sustainable future for our assessors, we do need to grow that assessor base. So we do only ask that you commit to a minimum of 1 review per year. 5 to 8 are not expected, as we know it does take. Generally, the figure I get from people is sort of 8 to 10 hours per review. And I know if it's borderline or there's other challenges, it can take longer. So, we've got this assessor pool of about 460. We've managed to add to that in the last couple of years. It's still the case that only about 40% of those are active in any given year. So, we have had a bit of a push in the last year to try and sort of reactivate some of those dormant assessors with some success. But we've also had, a push to have new assessors as well. So we had 22 new assessors last year and 7 so far this year. So 6 of those are in the room. So, do please keep sharing with your colleagues who are chartered, that they should work towards sort of part of this pathway towards becoming an assessor. We're very happy for those people to come and attend sessions like this, even if they're not an assessor yet, as part of that sort of progression towards becoming one in due course. So some recent trends, I've got this little spreadsheet with some summary numbers. You probably can't dive into all of those in detail, but I've just flagged a couple with a bit of green highlights. So last year's figures on the right-hand column, we had 198 applications, so 2 short of our absolute cap of 200. Ballpark, we're seeing a sort of 70% success rate in the last 4 years. I'd consider that broadly reflects a balance in upholding a clear and robust standard for chartership. However, a topic that comes up regularly as a challenge for candidates is supporters. And it's not clear how early in the application process that a candidate engages with their supporter. And in fact, talking to supporters at one company recently, where we were doing a session with them, even though they've got an accredited training scheme and they're clear to provide the support to their candidate, sometimes they were just going off piste on their own and getting an application in. So we really need to kind of, make sure that structure is nice and clear. We are seeing a refreshed uptake in the accredited company training schemes in the last couple of years. And, I really believe these provide a great framework for candidates to develop with their employers more direct support towards chartership. So we hope this will facilitate this supporter involvement. That said, it's in our interest, both for yourselves and for us at the office, to try and strive to improve the accept rate through receiving high quality applications from the get-go. So where these postpones occur, it can be quite intensive in terms of the feedback process. And for defers, it is very resources intensive due to needing more assessors for additional reviews. Defers are particularly challenging for candidates because when they reapply, they need to pay the application fee again. And the chances are they will have had quite a searching interview the first time round, and it'd be quite nerve-wracking for them. We've therefore been focusing in the last few years on really making sure that candidates are ready to validate a strong application when they do get to interview stage. In several cases, this has meant requesting additional information from the candidate after the initial submission to satisfy yourselves that the criteria have been adequately met in the documents themselves. So in practical terms on that aspect, what are we looking for from yourselves? If there are gaps that you sort of think they can be readily met by an additional sort of supplementary document to one of their existing ones, then that's something you can ask for. If there's sort of gaps across the whole application and in the broad range of documents, that's where, you might be looking to postpone somebody. We do appreciate that applications can sometimes be borderline, and with experience as an assessor, I know that you sort of read between the lines and make that decision with a clear rationale if you nonetheless feel they should go forward to interview. And we really are relying on your professional judgment as part of that. It's not always as black and white as it sounds. We've had many instances where we've had a borderline candidate and they have then had an absolutely stunning performance at interview and left the assessors in no doubt as to their suitability for chartership. So for as much as assessors are keen to have benchmarking measures, and we have the scoring criteria of appreciation, knowledge, experience and competency, as I say, we rely on your professional judgment in the assessment role. And this is one of the reasons we set up the pre-interview discussion forums for each round. So for the assessors involved in a given application round, you're invited to come to one of these Zoom forums. We tend to hold two, sort of to try and accommodate different times across the world where all our assessors are based. But you're very welcome to join as an assessor, even if you're not involved in that round. So when we do the call out for looking for volunteers, even if you can't volunteer that time, but would like to be involved in that pre-interview discussion, just flag that to us and we'll make sure that you're available. So just for context, about 25% of applications this year and last have asked for additional information from the assessors. So it's great to see that thoroughness and increasing consistency in the review approach across the assessor community. So I'm going to hand over to Kate, but in the context of the trends that we observe and the strong interest in recent applications coming through, we're continuing to improve the review process to try and make it as straightforward and as efficient as possible for yourselves. Kate is going to provide a refresher on the operational side of the review process and the different stages and timeline, as well as cover the topic of providing feedback in unsuccessful cases, whether it's postpone or defer, in a bit more detail, which, as you can see, is very pertinent to all the application outcomes, whether accept, asking for information or guidance for a defer candidate. So I was about to say, Peter, before we continue, do you have any questions? And yes, you have got a question.
It's a preferred option then for postponement rather than deferral?
Absolutely, yeah. I think sometimes I get feedback that sometimes from the supporter, in fact, that the candidate is really bitterly disappointed, but I feel that often it's the supporter sort of and how they're selling it to the candidate as it's sort of seen as a fail, whereas really for me the postpone is an opportunity, to really kind of consolidate the application, build on it where it's required and take on board that feedback. But if you think about the defer process, then requires us to have 2 more assessors, then they're going to hopefully reapply, and that's 2 more assessors again. So one application has had 6 assessors, which when we're already dealing with, a sort of pressure on your time and a bottleneck in terms of assessor numbers, is not a good place to be. And from the candidate's point of view, more importantly, and their experience, they don't want to be in a situation where they're having a sort of really interrogative interview where there's a lot of gaps and the assessors are half expecting it might go to a defer. Will it put them off in reapplying? And also, I think there's a misperception that employers are largely paying for their application fees. Certainly the people I talk to, that's not the case. So having to pay to apply twice is a pretty onerous task for them. So, the postpone is a better place to get to than a defer sort of at the initial outset, I think.
Wait, what's the difference between a postponement and a deferral, sorry?
Yeah, thanks. So the postpone is if you've reviewed their application documents and you decide that they're not ready to go forward to interview stage. Then if you postpone them, it's prior to interview. They've got the opportunity to address the feedback that you will provide and resubmit their application sort of with those additional comments. And in fact, for somebody who's postponed, they've got up to 2 years to resubmit their application. So sometimes, it is that they need to get more experience, which is obviously going to take that sort of time scale, as opposed to just that they didn't demonstrate the criteria in the documents. And the deferment is if they've had the interview and are then unsuccessful. So at that point, the assessors would recommend a defer outcome, and then it would go through another review process. So assessors then 2 more assessors review the application, the assessors reporting, and the interview recording. And we have 2 assessors that do that, but they do it independently of each other. And their outcome is, do they agree with the original assessors? Good to clarify.
Yeah.
Well, no, I'll start with a statement, then a question. I don't think we shouldn't be getting applications that lead to deferral. Sorry, let's use that word. We shouldn't be, and I'll put the blame firmly on the supporters. And I just wonder what work is being done with supporters to go really, one, is the application suitable?
Yeah.
And 2, because they're 2 different things, is the candidate ready? And I think there should be, I think the supporters should focus on those two things.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the challenge for us is how to preempt who's going to be a supporter and reach those people. So for example, if we're doing chartership talks either via the regional groups, via specialist groups, or we advertise for talks a year, which you could not be a fellow yet and register to do those. Typically those are attended by prospective candidates and not their supporters. Because the supporters obviously already chartered, they think that they know what they're doing and they don't need to revisit it. So what I'm finding works really well is I've been trying to work quite a lot more closely with organisations. So not just companies that have an accredited training scheme, but others as well, where there's a number of people wanting to apply for chartership. Maybe they're a small company and they don't have a lot of track record with people in their company already being chartered. So usually when I do those talks, especially if it is a large company, it's more coordinated centrally by their sort of professional development person. And it's a really good way to make sure that actually the supporters and mentors do come along. And you'd be surprised at some of the really big kind of large consultancy names where, I've had somebody in one office who felt quite isolated and didn't realise that there were 20 other people scattered around the country who could be their supporter. So that it sort of doing those talks and getting that kind of momentum kick started really helps to kind of connect those people up and make sure that they are getting the right support. They are engaging early, because once they've had this talk, often what people do, and it doesn't have to be led from the top, it can be led from the bottom, is having kind of like chartership drop-in sessions where people are working towards it over different timescales, but they can just check in with each other and sort of do some of that informal mentoring. So that is one of the ways where we're trying to sort of reach supporters a bit more systematically. But yeah, that has certainly been sort of the challenge, I think, in the last couple of years. We've been trying to reach assessors, trying to reach candidates, but the supporters was kind of the gap.
The supporters get feedback on a deferral. Do the supporters also get feedback on the whys and wherefores?
Yeah, so they haven't been, because thanks to GDPR, it's the candidate's application, and so the comms has been directly with them, and it's been left to them to share that with their supporter. And I'm not always sure if that's been the case. But certainly if somebody has been postponed and they have then reapplied, we've tried to sort of slightly enforce that the candidate has engaged that sort of feedback before reapplying with their supporter, by asking them to provide this kind of summary feedback form to sort of set out how they've addressed the various bits of feedback. And we also ask the supporter to provide a refreshed supporter statement, so that they're not just using the one from 6 months ago. The other thing we're doing as part of the sort of compliance checks on the documents before we issue them out to assessors, if the supporter statement is either very repetitive, even if it's more than a single line, but certainly if it's a single line, and we will go back to the supporters and ask them nicely to expand on their supporter statement and basically do another one.
On the sponsor statement, is there a box at the start that you could add to where the sponsor can say what level of support they've given the applicant? Because obviously you go through the competencies and you talk about, is there scope to add that to the sponsor statement?
Yeah, I guess so. It's something, good for us to take away. We've certainly added something on the candidates form, to a checkbox to ask for their permission, essentially, to liaise directly with their supporter. So that's something we've just changed quite recently. But yeah, it would be good to ask the supporter actually what.
There's, I know it's difficult, and I'm not offering solutions. Why would I? I'm a geologist, but I think that's our current gap to me.
Yeah.
Supporters.
Yeah.
And the signing a declaration, and for them, it's almost. Can I use the word unprofessional? There's a question about their professional status. If they can't look at an application in the round and go, yeah, this is sufficient.
I get that, but I was then quite surprised when I was talking to these people recently, where they felt like they were in quite a difficult spot, where they would have said the candidate wasn't ready yet, but the candidate had bulldozed ahead and put an application, and then this was the first they'd heard about it.
Life's not easy. So if their view is that it's not ready yet, they should go, it's not ready yet.
It had gone in before they'd had a chance to know that it was ready.
They hadn't signed it. They
You
hadn't
could-
signed it.
That's true.
They've gone, I don't think this is ready yet. An individual may have gone, and I know that I've been in the situation. I've not, I don't think it's ready yet. I haven't signed it, but somebody's gone, I don't think this is ready yet. You've put a lot of work into this, you're trying your hardest, you're up for promotion, whatever the reasons are, sign.
Yeah. I guess so that there's a number of documents to put in, and they may have got something signed off, even if
You're being too kind to them.
Okay.
Just as a follow on for that, it's just my personal observation, but I mean, you get a set of documents that quite often fairly generic, cut and paste. They've been signed off by a superior. You're supposed to assess them in terms of trying to figure out whether the candidate is acceptable or not, which means somebody else has already signed off on that report anyway. That my tendency is always to go, well, they've put this effort in, the supporters signed it off, whoever their line manager is has signed it off, and therefore this must be something that they have contributed to, which tends to mean you err on the side of, we'll interview them, only to then get to the interview and go, this person hasn't got the faintest idea what they're talking about. And that's problematic, because you've got documents that are very, very consistent. A number of geo-environmental interpretive reports that they're just the same. So because that's the format that people are supposed to supply. So I find it really, really difficult to be able to figure out how much of that report that I'm reading has been generated by the candidate, and how much of it is just the company's generic document. Which
I think
I tend to emphasise the CPD record, because I think that tends to give a better indication of exactly how engaged the person is, and the supporter statement, because they ought to know what this person is like.
But you've recently changed the guidance to suggest that the supporting documents might be better as drafts. I can't remember the exact wording. but
Yeah,
Which will suggest, don't present us with the finished product. Get us back a step. So
Yes.
really don't have
Hand drawn.
Yeah, absolutely.
so we'll delve more into supporting documents later on. But I think just sort of in response to your point there, Peter, you know, that's where the support the cover sheet, you know, really needs to sort of back that up. And I think, you know, when I'm talking to candidates, I'm really trying to encourage them not to make it sort of a two-line, you know, this document does criteria 1 and 2. I did all of the report. You know, like go into a bit more detail, provide that signposting to really specific places. And certainly I have seen some documents where the candidate's actually gone through the PDF and added like annotated boxes with commentary.
One of the referrals, when they came back for an interview, that's exactly what they did. And it was like, oh, light bulb came on, this is fantastic, I know exactly.
Yeah.
But like candidates need to know, so they would know that they can do that. Because I mean, it would be helpful, just coming back to your point on sponsors, would be helpful to put some, as a sponsor, you are required to, you know, I feel like they don't really know what their role is sometimes.
Okay.
I just think on that point, I mean, quite often the sponsors are not from the organisation or the same chartership. And I just think, for myself as a sponsor, I think I would have been rubbish if I hadn't been an assessor, because quite often you're chartered quite a long time ago. The rules change.
Yeah.
It's like the increase, you know, like how you sort of put things together. You don't have a good idea, and again, because you've seen a number of recent ones from being assessor, I feel like I'm a much better sponsor because of that.
Well, something we can look at doing is a more sort of targeted, you know, workshop for supporters. I think, and set it out that way, even if essentially a lot of the information's the same as what we're providing the candidate, but targeting it from the angle of the supporter. So yeah, that's been on my radar, but I think it would be good to, you know, just sort of in light of your comments there, Jason, I think that's something we can take forward.
I've just sort of, having seen a few people, even in my office, actually go through chartership application, that they're very keen, very driven individuals, and you're not going to get in their way. So regardless of whether the sponsor maybe thinks they are capable, it's still their own piece of work. They've still got submitted, they still need to demonstrate it. And I think that's the challenge, is actually the person, as a sponsor, you might know that individual very well, look very capable, but it's their work, their submission, their application. So I think that's a very difficult thing to sort of steer the candidate in the right way. The one area that I have sort of been fairly active on was somebody who went through in the last year, and their presentation was like, from the get-go, stop, you've got to talk about geology. And it was just, it's a wonderful bit of content here, but you are essentially a geologist. But that instant feedback, again, that's that person who's put together their own application, their own submission, their own presentation. And you know, it's a really good opportunity to do that. So dry run. But how do you steer them? And I think the sponsors, you know, just going through that process, they're not a tip somewhere. Yes, I think the recent training event, what the sponsor should be able to.
The sponsor should be clear, they are the first assessor.
Yeah.
And somehow, perhaps on the sponsor form, above their signature, say, you are the first assessor. Would you pass this person in some words?
It's market professionalism to take challenge and criticism, feedback.
And that's the supporter.
Exactly.
Some good discussion, thank you. It's a good job we're recording it so that I can not scribble things down and try and talk to you, and we can kind of sort of assimilate the notes later. So I'm gonna, one more.
Is there time to squeeze in another question?
Sure.
As a new boy to this whole process, I just want to go back to this distinction between postponement and deferment. And it seems that there's a scenario whereby someone submits an application and there's a few gaps. So giving that person the benefit of the doubt to move them forward to interview, and those gaps aren't really filled. So maybe they're a near miss, but branding them as being a deferred candidate rather than a postponed candidate seems to be maybe overly harsh. So there's no possibility of postponing somebody after interview with a series of recommendations as to the gaps they might fill and ask them to resubmit.
So essentially they do, once the defer reviewers have also reviewed the application, you know, has the processes been followed? Has the review been fair? And do they agree with, you know, with the outcome? All of the feedback from both the original assessors and the two defer reviewers is then collated and provided to the candidate as feedback for a resubmission. So they are getting that feedback process with the opportunity to reapply. But you know, if you think about the amount of resources that has gone into and sort of time to that point, you know, we do need, in order to sort of cover itself, they do need to then reapply and pay the application fee again as part of the defer process.
But if they were postponed that, if that were possible, then that secondary review process wouldn't happen. They would just act on a series of recommendations made by the original assessor. Or am I wrong?
I think at that point, having had an interview, we do need to then have a sense check of whether the process has been followed fairly and in line with the regulations.
It would be true we're often too kind in proceeding to interview. Postpone more earlier. Just you don't answer that and just leave it.
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it?
It's a very balance.
It is. It's not an easy balance.
Shall actually go for much better because of your question.
Not to give them the
Not to give the interview, give the feedback, give some more time for consideration, and then they're more prepared when they come to the interview because of the questions you ask.
Is it the case coming from really useful is that if you're going to get persuaded, it's probably because you've sold yourself. If you're going to get deferred, it's probably because you don't sell yourself.
Easy question.
I mean, that's you know that might. I mean, that seems logical. Really, to how you describe.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some advice there. It's very.
I think just changing the sort of narrative and slightly that seeing postponement as not being a fail would be a good sort of culture shift. I think you know, seeing postpone as an opportunity rather than that they've, you know, got stumped at the first hurdle.
Maybe saying fail instead of deferral would focus people on getting it right.
We try and call it unsuccessful, James. Right, we're going to move on to try and keep on track. So I'm going to invite Kate up next to cover some of the operational side.
Hello. So just a bit of housekeeping. People on Zoom cannot really hear your questions. Mohammed brought a microphone with him. So for the following questions, if you can raise your hand, Mohammed will give you the microphone and we can make sure that our assessors on Zoom can hear all your questions. Is it working? Is it the green one? Yes. So this scary map, I like scary maps. This is a diagram that outlines end-to-end flow of the Geological Society Chartership assessment process. And this map specifically focuses on your role as an assessor. You'll notice that we intentionally focused on you and we removed the candidate, the supporters from this map. The middle part of this map is your assessment alone. On top, we've got the Chartership office, and we here removed part of our processes just to focus on the points where we communicate with you directly. We also added our soon-to-be assessors or assessors in training as observers.
Is that available?
I will send it over. So we prepared some of the process maps. As you know, we recently changed our CRM, our website, and the system in general. So for that purpose, we prepared some process maps that I think for some people can be quite helpful. Okay, good idea. I'll do that. So each arrow on this map represents key point of communications. As such, every message, response, and action plays a crucial role in keeping the process efficient and on track. From the moment the Geological Society circulates the list of candidates to assessors, your involvement is essential. The momentum of the entire application pipe depends heavily on your engagement and responsiveness. Your assessment from the back is the backbone of the decision-making process. So when you review the application thoroughly, provide timely feedback, and collaborate efficiently with each other, that help to ensure that the society maintains fair, rigorous, and professional standards for chartership. It's not working. Oh. So shortly after we send you the list of candidates, and shortly after we send you the candidates' documents, you'll receive a date poll to schedule the interview. At this stage, we understand that you're not you likely haven't had time to fully review the application, but the purpose of the early scheduling is strategic. We send this polls early to ensure that all three parties, you, your co-assessor, and the candidate have the best chance of finding the mutually convenient time before calendars become too full. More importantly, this gives the candidate a clear deadline to work towards and prepare the presentation. Before we introduced this and the early interview poll and deadline, we had a lot of candidates coming to us saying that the interview was arranged just a few days before, and they didn't have sufficient time to prepare. That made them very nervous. So if you can respond to our poll quickly and efficiently, that makes it much easier for us. That reduces the number of emails we have to send. So it is a very important part of the process. This you've probably seen before. This is the table we sent to you with the list of candidates at the beginning of the process. This is the list of deadlines for this upcoming September round of reviews. And sometimes the naming convention here is confusing. We call the round after the month of council election, hence September election, even though we start so early, and the deadline for candidates submission was in June. So assessment deadline, this is the whole assessment deadline interview and the key dates of the assessment cycle. Each deadline here is critical, not only for maintaining a smooth process, but also to ensure candidates receive timely outcomes and fair consideration. Each step involves each step that involves is essential. So one of the newer deadlines is request additional information. We only introduced that last year. And as Eleanor mentioned earlier, that has been quite successful. We've introduced a new deadline as the start of the interview schedule to give structure to the early part of assessment. You typically receive the candidate's documents about a month before this deadline. This allows you enough time, hopefully, to do an initial review and spot red flags where additional information or clarification is needed. Importantly, it gives the candidates time to respond and still gives you ample opportunity to evaluate the full updated submission before the interview decision. Then we've got the application review form, your first pre-interview form that you submit. This is the point where you and your co-assessor formally decide whether the candidate progresses to interview or if the application is postponed. It's vital that the forms are submitted on time as they determine the interview schedule and impact the overall timeline. Delays at this stage can cause knock-on effect across the whole process, potentially postponing outcomes for candidates. Then we've got the Assessor Discussion Forum that Eleanor mentioned before. This is an informal touchpoint that gives you space to discuss, review queries, share experiences, or raise points of concerns. It helps build confidence in decision-making and strengthens the overall consistency of assessment. Then we've got the interview window. It's usually between 2 and 3 weeks. In this round, it's a bit longer. I think it's 3 weeks because that's the summer holiday. So after the interview, you submit your post-interview forms. And this is the final assessment and recommendation you will submit. These forms provide the official basis for the election decision, so they must be received before the PCC meeting, and here that's going to be 16th of September. Missing this step jeopardizes the candidate ability to be reviewed in this cycle all round. I've also added, we usually don't send the part with the PCC council meeting and review outcome notification, but I think it might be quite helpful for you to know what happens after the interview. So the candidate only learns the outcome of the review a day after the council meeting. So on the morning of 25th of September, I'm going to send them an email informing them of your decision, and they will receive the digital certificate, election letter, and so on. Let's jump to the next slide. So this is another timeline. This is the one that the candidate receives. And this is why the staying on schedule matters so much. This Chartership application timeline is the one we share with the candidates at the beginning of the review process. It gives them a general sense of the key stages of the review, from the application submission through the final election outcome. While this timeline is meant to provide clarity and reassurance, it can sometimes have opposite effect when process appears delayed, particularly towards the end of each phase, when candidates reach a milestone date and they haven't had any information yet. So it's natural for them to become nervous or feel they need to chase for updates. We try to avoid this. This is why it's so important for assessors to stick as closely as possible to the key deadlines. So your timely documents review, requests or clarification, and interview decision all help to keep communication flowing nicely, and everything help us keep everything aligned. Of course, we always remind candidates that this is a general framework, not a fixed schedule. We explain that you are volunteers and some flexibility here is needed, but maintaining momentum as best as we can greatly improves the candidate's experience. It reduces anxiety on their part and our part too, minimizes follow-ups, and preserves the professional tone of the process. This slide offers some practical low-effort tips that can make a big difference in staying on schedule. One of the best habits is simply adding the deadline to your personal or work calendars as soon as you receive the assessment schedule. You can set a reminder a few days in advance so nothing sneaks up on you. I also recommend scheduling a dedicated window for document review. Just like a meeting, it helps avoid last-minute scrambles, and early skim through documents helps you highlight any red flags or gaps, giving you time to request further information. And again, responding to the placeholder polls quickly is a small step that sets a huge number that lets us avoid a huge number of emails later. Also, collaborating with your co-assessor early keeps things aligned. And you might not noticed on the process map I showed at the beginning, but we do not, we only schedule an interview for you. We do not schedule the one-on-one assessor meeting beforehand. Many of you chooses to do that on your own, and we do encourage that. It's good to meet beforehand and discuss the application, your questions, and so on. If you prefer to do that online or via email, that's all fine, but we do believe that it really helps the process. Finally, if you ever think that deadline might slip, just let us know. The good communication helps us to stay on track in the whole process. And now we go to the constructive feedback part of the session. As assessors, the feedback you provide is not just part of the formal process. It plays a vital role in supporting candidates' professional development. Whether a candidate is successful or deferred, your comments help them understand where they stand, what they did well, and where the improvement is needed. In this session, we'll explore how to give feedback that is clear, balanced, and genuinely helpful. Even when delivering difficult messages, the goal is to ensure that every candidate walks away with a sense of direction and not discouragement. Constructive feedback is one of the most valuable tools we offer as part of Chartership journey. So what the constructive feedback is, it is a clear evidence-based guidance that acknowledges candidates' strengths, pinpoints a specific gap, and offer particular steps to close that gap. So the recipient knows exactly what to improve and how to do it. Giving constructive feedback is important because it turns the assessment moment into a development opportunity for the individual, the organization, and the professional and the profession. So what makes feedback constructive? Constructive feedback is purpose-driven. Our end goal is helping candidates to grow into chartered professionals, and feedback is a tool, not a verdict. It's evidence-based, so cite competencies, pages, or interview moments, and avoid vague labels like weak or good. It's not really helpful. It's balanced. So start with a real strength, then pair each development point with an achievable suggestion. It's action-oriented. Every comment should answer, so what do I do now? How can I change things? And it's respectful and objective. You can replace personal language, like you were unprepared, with more neutral phrases like the response to Q5 lacks detail on XYZ. So feedback is sometimes treated as an afterthought, yet it is essential. It gives candidates a clear view of their strengths, highlights the area they need to develop, and accelerates their professional growth. A discussion with two seasoned assessors, experts who have already navigated pitfalls in their careers, and the pitfalls that candidates are only about to face, can be a remarkable catalyst for them. Because you hold a significant influence in these interactions, you carry a responsibility to the candidate and to the profession. So please provide thoughtful, considerate guidance and genuine support. Yay, it worked this time. So this is the pre-interview feedback and the point where we fill out the first form, the pre-interview review form. At this point, you decide to postpone the candidate. Treat your comments much like the ones you give in post-interview feedback. So pinpoint the sections of the application that need further work. Give concrete examples of how they could be strengthened, and also acknowledge the parts that already meet the standards. This balance helps the candidate to see both the target and the gap, and understand what part of the application was strong and how to build the other parts to match it. If you decide to proceed to interview, the pre-interview form is more of an internal aid, a memoir. Note the candidate's key strengths and concerns, and the questions you plan to explore. Also, feel free to contact the candidate ahead of time if you decide to interview, and tell them what you like to see in the presentation, or hit at the discussion topics you intend to focus on. So connecting each observation to a specific chartership competency here is very helpful. The examples of the weak feedback would be this technical section of the application was poor, and the stronger version of that would be, let's say, competency 3 lacks evidence of XYZ. So please include XYZ in your updated response. Also, remember to phrase your postponement more as a pause and moment to rethink your application, not a rejection. And then we proceed to post-interview feedback. Successful candidates still need development cues. So feedback shouldn't end at well done. We often see feedback from very successful candidates whose application was amazing, the interview was great, and it's often just 2 sentences saying everything was great, you're great, just continue to do what you do. But it does not help them to develop more. They would still benefit more from you noticing the particular parts, the strengths and weaknesses, to help them build from this moment. For unsuccessful candidates, anchor critics in the interview specific moments. So like during question 4, you said, and try to be as precise as possible. I mentioned situation behavioral impact module here. This works more in face-to-face feedback situations. So if you are also a mentor or supporter for someone, I urge you to research SBI models a bit more. It really helps during the review process. And the last one is to ensure alignment. If a weakness is flagged after the interview but not before, explain why. This happens quite often, where we've got an application, we proceed to interview, this wasn't highlighted to the candidate that you considered something a weakness, but it comes out in the post-interview review, and they are often confused why this wasn't mentioned before. So, about writing actionable, constructive feedback. it should be specific. So reference pages, paragraphs, or parts of the interview, turning abstract critique into traceable items. It should be balanced. One genuine strength for each major improvement area keeps motivation high. Action-oriented wording, so swap lack of leadership experience for lead a cross-disciplinary task for at least 3 months and document your outcomes. Use plain language. Many of our candidates' first language isn't English, or even if it is, pretend it isn't. So avoid acronyms and keep your language as simple as possible. And remember to be respectful. You can critique work, but do not critique a person. Use the submission instead of you. So this is Records Transparency and Freedom of Information Act. Any record information, including drafts and informal notes, all the forms you submit may be requested by the candidate. So please bear that in mind when you write your comments. Assume full disclosure. Write nothing you wouldn't be comfortable reading out loud in public. Separate data protection, protected content. So personal or third-party details and omitted from your feedback. We've got quite a few applicants that work with very sensitive data. So from GDPR point of view, this is very important. Confirm secure storage. Mohammed will talk about it a bit more later on, but please follow Chartership Office policy on keeping the recordings and forms and destroying them as soon as they are no longer needed. And the last one, and very important one, keep the professional tone. Sarcastic or dismissive language can undermine institutional credibility. This has been done. Any questions? Jenny has the...
Good luck.
Thank you. A couple of questions. Firstly, now that the interview is recorded, is the recording of the interview and any subsequent discussion subject to freedom of information?
Yes, it is. If we do start the recording as soon as we start the meeting, especially if it's on Zoom, because it records automatically. If you do not wish to ask for us to keep the recording of your talk, of your discussion before and after the interview, we can delete that part, but we will keep the part of the interview itself. Also, we do not keep the recordings of the successful reviews. We only keep the deferred recordings for further review.
And the other question I had was about discussion with the other assessor pre-interview. So particularly where I've decided that I'm minded to postpone a candidate, I tend to like to have a conversation with the other assessor before I come back to the society. But last time I did that, I got the impression that you'd have preferred it if I'd come to you first, not to the other assessor. So I'd be interested to hear the preference there.
Yeah, I don't recollect that particular instance, Neil. But yeah, thanks for raising it. I think essentially we're encouraging you to complete your own assessment in the first place. But it's not the case that you can't then discuss it with the other assessor. I think, just get through your own assessment. We do often have a case where someone's would go to interview and somebody else would postpone. And usually, at that point, I would then get the two of you to have a conversation. I just think when you're sort of at the early part of the review, you kind of need to be undertaking your own assessment. But yeah, there's not a sort of there's a bit of a grey line as to where that discussion point can start. But I think I'd like you to kind of get to the point where you've formed your own view before you have that chat with your co-assessor.
I suppose the danger is I might have formed my view before they have. So
that's true, but I think you can reach out to them and ask them if they've had a chance to look at it before you reveal your view.
yeah, okay, thank you.
It's a real question, not a comment. You mentioned that the assessors should contact the candidate to talk about the content of the presentation at interview.
So
Did I hear that correctly, or does the office do that?
when we schedule the interview, we copy both assessors and the candidate in that invitation. So you can respond to that and send some of your suggestions. And if you don't feel comfortable with that, just go through us and say, at the interview point, we agree to interview, but we would like you to inform the candidate that we would like to see A, B, C on the presentation and to answer specific questions. Yeah. But I'll just add that sometimes when you contact the candidate directly, they feel more empowered to ask you for some cues or follow-up questions. It depends if you feel comfortable with that direct contact with them.
Just out of curiosity, have you ever had a freedom of information request for a declined application?
Not yet. We had a few general Freedom of Information Act requests from our fellows, but not from Chartership candidates yet.
And the real question, as somebody who's got a terrible memory, are the recordings of the interviews available for us to go back to in order for us to be able to provide the specific comments that you're looking for in terms of the documentation or the response?
In case of the defer review, so we do not download the recordings of the successful reviews at all. I guess we could do that. The system deletes them automatically after 5 weeks. But if you request, I guess we could do that. And if it helps you to, in case of defer, if it helps you to form better feedback to review the recording, I think we could do that.
Thank you. Roughly what percentage of people who are deferred reapply?
Good question. I do not remember. I think it was about 20%, but it's a guesstimate.
Yeah, because I have offered once or twice, because obviously through a deferral there's 4 assessors involved, to just give a bit a session afterwards, like an hour, just to give some thoughts, but that wasn't taken up. But they may not want to see you or talk to you, I guess. But I mean, it's something I have offered up, but it hasn't been taken up. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say on the whole for both deferred or postponed candidates, if one of the assessors involved has offered to provide a feedback session or some mentoring, I would say it's very rare that hasn't been taken up by a candidate. They're usually very happy to get that extra input, especially if they are in a company where, you know, the people available to do those support roles are not also chartered geologists. They're either chartered with something else or not chartered. Maybe it was just you, James. Question from Gwen?
It's going on
Just one question on the recordings again. I guess some of you probably had opportunity to experience a deferred interview. I haven't had that joy yet, but is there any scope at some stage to watch a deferred interview, or is it too sensitive, just to see what has gone wrong or what could go wrong?
Well, that's difficult. I think we would have to talk to our data protection officer about that and see if we can share it. We do add a disclaimer on the application form that we can use the application for the training purposes. I think I would prefer to ask the candidate directly if they feel comfortable with us sharing the interview recording for training purposes. I guess this is something we can think about. And we do have some deferred candidates that took the feedback on board, then returned and applied successfully. And I think they might be more willing to agree to sharing the original interview recording.
Could you use a
Sorry. Could you use a redacted transcript?
I guess we can, although it's a lot of work to redact. So I would definitely prefer to ask for permission to share the recording.
I think my observation of candidates I've deferred and deferred reviews I've done is that in almost all cases, it was clear that they shouldn't have been interviewed. I'm not sure what you learn from reviewing the interview, because I suspect that the reason for deferring that interview will vary from candidate to candidate. But as I say, looking at an application, in fact, as we're invited to do today, all of the candidates, I think it's been clear they probably shouldn't have gone to interview in the first place.
Although we see quite often on the defer review forms that the defer assessors say that they would also agree to interview after reviewing the documents, but after reviewing the interview recording, they say it's clear that the candidate is not successful.
That either tells me I'm meaning it pre-interview, or, but obviously there's an opportunity to go wrong at interview, but I suspect it's every candidate's different.
Yeah. Or maybe
I would agree that an interview.
Need a microphone.
I would agree that at interview, it's not a fine balance for deferment. It falls into the blindingly obvious bracket. I've never had an experience where you at interview for deferral. But yeah, I think it's.
Duncan?
Yeah, just in response to that, James, I was about to say, I think the ones that are most instructive are the deferral interviews where it is finely balanced. But the work involved in looking at all of that and the conversations amongst the assessors will be quite considerable. But in response to your comment, James, I had one last year, I think, where one of the assessors was quite enthusiastically keen to charter. The other assessor was quite enthusiastic to not to go for a deferral. I looked at it and it was a real contradiction, because the candidate was quite obviously a very high quality individual. You know, they were educated, fluent, enthusiastic, yada yada yada. But the reason I recommended a deferral at that point was a very subtle one, and you kind of wouldn't get that without looking at the whole system. And obviously, I was right. Only when people deserve it.
Thanks. I'm here to learn about the process because just interested. The placeholder poll, is it like a question like, are you available? Or is it a question like, are you available for candidate X or Y? Or what's the question?
So after you select a candidate and we send you the documents, we send you the poll, and we now started using doodle polls for that, where you've got whole interview window and you select days and hours when you're available.
We get to choose from a list of 50 candidates.
There's quite a lot of them.
The poll,
I mean, no, just for the one. So it's just for the one candidate you've selected. So it's after
Right.
you received the application.
so the poll is for interview dates, essentially, some forward planning on getting a provisional date in the calendar.
So we send the same poll to you, your co-assessor, and the candidate, and based on that, I can see what dates are good for all three of you. Okay,
Super. Thanks very much. Oh, one more question.
Thanks, Eleanor and Kate. I've actually got 4 questions, but I'll just limit it to one. Recently, last year or so, I had myself and my co-assessor and the candidate were all living close to each other within an hour, and my company was also able to offer a meeting room. And so I asked if we could have the interview in person, but that was declined by the society. And I believe that they're all to be online now, and for the purposes of recording and that kind of thing. But it seems a bit soulless to me. Is that it forever now? Are they virtual events forevermore?
We are trying to be consistent across the review process, so hence why we're trying to keep it, to one format or the other. So as it stands, yes, we'd like them to be online. If we look further into issues around AI and so on, and if that forces a change in the future that we need to go back to in person, then we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But at the moment, it's more to have a consistent sort of format for all candidates, that not that one was lucky to have 2 assessors nearby, and
there's probably not many
else.
anyway, are there?
Yeah.
And that what you mentioned about the AI, which was another question, which was on the application now, it says, please raise, if you have applied AI, ChatGPT or whatever in your application, please raise that with the Chartership team. Have you had many of those?
No.
No, I didn't think so.
No.
Would anybody fess up to that, do you think?
Well, indeed. So this would be a really good point to introduce Mr. Fruin, Dr. Fruin, in fact. We were going to sing you happy birthday, but I can see time's ticking on and we won't embarrass you. So thank you for joining us, and just be nice to... So Neil is our chair of the Professional and Chartership Committee. It is his birthday. He is doing other important talks and sessions today, but actually we have a small working group within the committee recently kind of started looking at AI. So actually Neil is the perfect person to maybe just come and say something, but you need to talk here where the microphones are.
There. Yeah, so thank you very much. So I'm Neil Fruin. I currently lead specialist geoscience for Shell here in London. So that's my day job, which I've dashed over here from. But I also took over as chair of the Professional and Chartership Committee last year from Jim Griffiths, Professor Jim Griffiths, which were big shoes to fill, very big shoes to fill. But luckily we've got a fantastic team here who support us in the JOLSOC, and I've got a very good committee as well which cover all the geosciences I'm less familiar with. So that's really helpful too, actually, in providing some balance. Some really good questions and some discussion I've already heard. I really wanted to come and just thank you because you are absolutely the backbone of chartership and professional qualifications for the Geological Society. Without you, we wouldn't be able to do this. I couldn't do all the interviews, the 200 interviews per cycle. Eleanor couldn't. We really rely on your experience and your background and your empathy and everything else to cover the interviews that get us to that point. Even in the world of AI as it's emerging, we can't do this without experience and background, and you bring all of that. So it's really important that you're here and that you're here for the training today, because without you we wouldn't make this work. It's a very soft exercise, of course, and occasionally very delicate. Now, I only ever get to see the deferrals and postponements. I don't know why don't I ever get to see the nice ones where people pass? So we normally have a discussion around those. So we see all the evidence, we see all the interviews, I occasionally look at the videos because some of them are sometimes quite delicate. If you tell someone that they're not chartered, then they often can take that as a slight on their ego, on their professionalism, et cetera. So it can be quite a delicate phase, and we often use your words and your comments and your judgments to feed back to the candidates and provide that constructive feedback, as Kate outlined just now. So it's really important that you think about some of the things she was able to bring today and use those in your feedback, because we use those when it comes to the difficult decisions. And I think, as was it you, Neil, I think you mentioned that I think that we prefer to stay away from postponements and deferrals if we can. So we try and catch before interview if candidates aren't ready to go through that process. And we're trying to get better at doing that as well. But there will be, of course, be occasions where you say, okay, this candidate just isn't up to this qualification at this time. So, in those cases, it's really important that we get your feedback and it's good feedback, because then I will look at it and I have to make sometimes a judgment, sometimes on very, I think as you said at the back there, sometimes there's very small differences between the assessors in terms of what they decide, and often it can be very polar recommendations that are being made at the same time. So yeah, it's important we get your feedback there. AI is an interesting topic. We're just starting to cover that now, actually, because it's actually important across the society, but it's particularly important in the on the chartership side. Kate is leading a working group with the committee. We had Paul Cleverly come and talk to us at the last committee meeting about the role of AI generally in geosciences, and both the threats and the opportunities for us. And we have both, of course, particularly in the professional and chartership side. There are threats and there are opportunities to how we do this. And we have to embrace the opportunities and very carefully mitigate for the threats. And so that's why Kate and a small team is looking closely at that now, because it will inevitably impact the way we do this as well. Yeah, that was all I wanted to say, really. Thank you, Helena and team. Appreciate you being here. Very much appreciated. And shame I can't stay around for the rest of it. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Neil, for taking the time to drop in. There's a couple of questions in the chat which I'm going to respond directly to. I'm just conscious that time is going on, so I'm going to get Mohammed up next to cover his topic of GDPR. I think we might start to run out of time to have our sustainability panel, but I'm going to find a way to weave that in this afternoon so that we can still get that covered. So next up we'll have Mohammed. Thank you.
Works. Right. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Mohammed. I'm the head of fellowship services, and I have oversight over membership and chartership. And today I've been asked to give you a brief overview of GDPR, which is increasingly a sort of a very important area, particularly as we're dealing with a lot of sensitive information. And it has a big impact on the chartership process and you as sort of volunteer assessors. So what is GDPR? GDPR is the General Data Protection Regulations, which is a EU regulation governing the use of personal data, which first came into effect in 2018. And despite Brexit, it still applies to the UK as it forms part of UK law under the European Union Withdrawal Act. At the heart of GDPR is an individual's right to privacy, and an organization such as ourselves must adhere to its key principles and obligations in order to process personal data legally. The regulations are strict, and breaching them can result in substantial fines up to I think 17.5 million, or 4% of an organisation's turnover, which is whichever is higher. So as you can imagine, it is quite serious if we get it wrong. In January 2020, the UK left the European Union and is therefore now considered a third country for GDPR purposes. However, this does not mean that the EU GDPR no longer applies to us, as it affects companies worldwide that may handle data belonging to EU data subjects. And a data subject is anyone that can be identified from personal data collected. The UK Data Protection Act 2018 is our implementation of GDPR and contains almost identical requirements as the EU legislation. We refer to this as the UK GDPR. Along with that came a joint agreement between us and the EU, so that data can flow freely between the UK and the EU. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so what's the purpose of this presentation apart from the legal side? As an assessor, you're obliged to undertake GDPR training every 3 years, but it's good practice to refresh your GDPR knowledge every year. If you undertake GDPR training at work, that will also count towards this requirement. Also, as an assessor, you are likely to come into contact with lots of personal data and sensitive information. So the purpose of this presentation is also to provide you with an awareness of your responsibilities as a volunteer in relation to data protection. Every organization is required to have policies and procedures in place to ensure that they are managing data safely and in accordance with general data protection legislation. And as staff and volunteers, we should all make sure we are aware of the society's policies and procedures, and that we follow them consistently when handling personal data in our day-to-day roles. Okay, so a little bit about GDPR terminology. So under GDPR, there are 3 main actors. There's the data subject, which is the individuals whose personal data is being processed. In our case, it will be the candidate. Then we have the data controller, the organization who is responsible or determines the manner in which the data is processed and stored. In this case, it's the Geological Society. And the data processor, which is the person who processes data on behalf of the data controller, which is, in this case, which is yourself. In terms of processing, processing covers every aspect of dealing with personal data, including adding, editing, deleting files, even doing nothing with the data and simply storing it is covered under GDPR and its personal data. Okay, so we move on to key aspects of GDPR. There are 3 key aspects to GDPR which we need to be mindful of. First is the rights of the individual, which is the data subject. This means the person has the right to know what is held about them. They can ask for corrections or withdraw consent for it to be processed at any time. Second is that we must use a lawful basis to process data. The organizations or data controllers must set out very clearly the single lawful basis under which we are processing the data subject's personal data. And there are 6 lawful bases that can be used. but we can only use one for each purpose. Of the 6, there are, I'll just list, it's up there. It's so we've got consent. So we must be clear, informed. There must be clear, informed consent from the data subject for a specific reason. Then there is contractual, which is necessary to fulfill a contract. We then have legal obligation, where it's required for complying with common law or statutory obligation. Then we have vital interest, so things like saving the data subject from harm. And then there is public interest, in the public interest, or if it's set out in law. And then we have finally legitimate interest. So anything where there is a legitimate interest for maybe the society to hold onto that data for any particular purpose. The third point is around sort of data protection principles. So data controllers, or more usually the data processors who act on behalf of the controller, must process the personal data in a manner which meets all 7 of the data protection principles. So the 7 principles are lawfulness, fairness, transparency. And then we have purpose limitation, so using the data for specific purpose it was collected. Data minimization, so not collecting excessive or irrelevant data. Data accuracy, when we're recording it. Storage limitation, so not keeping data for any longer than it's actually needed. And then we have integrity and confidentiality, and finally accountability. The society processes personal data under a number of lawful bases. So for example, consent, we use consent, so consenting to receive marketing emails, the society's e-newsletters, and so on, and publications. We also use contractual. So in order to receive services fellows have paid for, their personal data must be used for that to be processed. And similarly, where they're applying for chartership, they're submitting the chartership application, there is a contractual basis there that we can use to process the data. We also use legal obligation for things like financial information, where we need to hold on to data for around 6 years. We also use public interest for things like storing archive data. So the society stores a lot of sort of historical data for archiving purposes. And then we have we also use sort of legitimate interest. So things like CCTV and so on would be legitimate interest. Okay, so we move on to a little bit about personal data and sensitive information. So as a volunteer, you're likely to come into contact with lots of personal data and sensitive information. So when a candidate submits their application and supporting documents to apply for chartership, we need to ensure we treat this data in such a manner that it complies with GDPR. So what is personal data? GDPR covers personal data relating to living persons. The definition is quite broad and includes anything which can be related to an individual. It can be as simple as a name, but will include things such as addresses, work and personal email addresses, telephone numbers, health information, religion, gender, sexuality, bank details, photos, signatures, academic qualifications, and so on. It also includes online identifiers such as IP address and cookie data. Whilst much of this data might be in digital written format, during your volunteering, you're also likely to obtain personal data through conversations and interactions with others. So it's important that you treat this data confidentially and use it in a safe way that complies with the law. So the key is confidentiality is key, and you should always be respectful of people's rights to privacy. Finally, only share information on a need-to-know basis with the individual's prior consent. Right, so a little bit about, it says guidance there, but this is guidance for data protection principles and how it applies to your work as an assessor. So during the chartership application process, assessors must follow all the data protection principles mentioned earlier. So in terms of integrity and confidentiality, you must store the candidate's application supporting documents in a secure manner. For instance, do not store where other people can access this data, such as a shared computer. Other than staff or assessors who are directly involved in the candidate's application, you must not share contents of the candidate's application or supporting documents with anyone else. For purpose limitation, you must ensure that candidate's application and supporting documents is only used for the chartership process. You cannot reuse, repurpose any information outside of this without seeking further permission from the candidate. For data minimization, any data requested from the candidate, such as during the interview process, should be relevant to the chartership application process. You should not request excessive or irrelevant data. In terms of accuracy, when compiling the data, so when compiling the candidate's reports, you must be as accurate as possible on your report, in the process. For storage limitation, once the final report is completed and is no longer needed, you must securely delete all documents, all data that you hold on the candidate and the candidate's application, including sort of supporting documents. Okay, so moving on to a little bit about key things we can do to keep information safe. I think these are sort of generally sort of bread and butter GDPR. So lock your computer screens when you're away from your desk using the screen lock function. Ensure you have strong passwords that cannot be easily guessed. Password protect documents containing personal data. If you're using shared computers, do not store candidates' data on these shared computers. If you're working on the move, do not use public Wi-Fi services. Only use VPNs or your own 4G, 5G network where applicable. On limited occasions where the data needs to be portable, we recommend that to use encrypted USB sticks. And these can be provided to you by the Society's IT department. So if you let the chartership team know, they'll be able to send one to you. Finally, destroy the documents, delete and empty the bin as soon as the information is no longer required. Okay, so a little bit about emails and internet security. So use of BCC. So when mass mailing, use the blind carbon copy function, as it prevents people on the distribution list from seeing other people's email addresses. Beware of phishing, viruses, ransomware, and spoofing. Emails, and beware of emails purporting to originate from well-known establishments or individuals asking you to follow or click a link. If they may look genuine, but if you're not expecting the email, then it's good practice not to click on any of these links. And if you have an IT department, report it to your IT support in the first instance. When surfing, look for the HTTPS. Look to see that a website is secure by checking there is a S in the link. Also look out for the locked padlock icon on the top. However, in saying that, this in itself does not ensure complete safety, that the website is secure, particularly if you arrive on a site resulting from clicking on a link from a phishing email. But it is still good practice to ensure the existence of these points before submitting any personal data. Okay, some information on data breaches. So a personal data breach is defined as a breach of security leading to the accidental, unlawful destruction, loss, alteration, unauthorized disclosure of or access to personal data transmitted, stored, or otherwise processed. So a bit of a mouthful. Personal data breaches can be categorized as in three ways. So confidentiality breach, where there is unauthorized or accidental disclosure of access to personal data. This type of breach is the most common. Availability breach, where there is an accidental or loss of access to or destruction of personal data. For example, the sort of problem that might arise after a cyber attack that prevented access or destroyed a set of records. And then we have integrity breach, where there is unauthorized or accidental alteration of personal data. A data breach may involve all three categories depending on the circumstances. So it's not sort of case it's just one or the other. Okay, so what should you do if, in case of a data breach? First thing is you must immediately inform your point of contact at the society about the data breach. You can email dpo@gilsoc.org.uk. This is because under GDPR we only have 72 hours to notify the Information Commissioner's Office, or ICO, of the breach, and failure to do that in itself is a breach of the rules and increases the potential for a penalty to be imposed on the society. You must also give your GSL contact as much detail about the breach as possible, including the nature of the data, the categories and the number of individuals and personal data that's been affected. Okay, so the key points to remember from this presentation, to ensure that you destroy the documents as soon as they are no longer needed. Store and transfer any data files securely. Immediately inform the society of any breach. If you have any issues or questions, please get in touch with us at dpo@jolsoc.org.uk, or you can contact one of the members of the Chartership team. Thank you for listening, and I'm open for questions.